When this father rented a bed and breakfast for his family's holiday, he had no idea that he would soon get the fright of a lifetime. The house was located in a large woodland area, perfectly remote for a relaxing vacation. But that all changed when he took a picture of his wife and son. There was one thing Edward knew for sure. He wanted as much footage as possible from this trip. It was his son's first holiday, and he wanted it to be a time to remember. And with the brand new video recorder he had just bought, he could do just that. Edward asked his wife to keep the playful interaction going while he set up the camera. His wife smiled and asked her son to crawl towards her with a high-pitched voice. It was a perfect moment, and Edward was happy that he had managed to capture it all on camera. When he decided to take a look back at the footage he just shot, his face turned pale and his hand started trembling. Emily saw her husband's pale and confused face and started to get nervous instantly. "What is it?" "You almost seem scared," she proclaimed. Edward didn't answer at first, but then he started talking. Edward looked at the screen on his camera closely, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. But there was something else in the frame, something that wasn't supposed to be there, and that something else scared him. He told his wife to come over quickly so that she could confirm what he was seeing. "I want to know for sure that I'm not imagining it," he spoke. When she looked at the screen, she saw it as well. Both Emily and Edward looked up from behind the camera at the same time. It was clearly not just an anomaly that was only visible on their recorder screen, because in real life, they saw it as well. A red blinking light was visible in the woodland area behind their son. What was it? They were hesitant at first, but both of them decided that they wanted to know what the blinking light was. So nervously, they approached the line of trees on the edge of the field. After the negative result of Edward's search, they decided that they did not want to be out in the open much longer. They packed up their picnic gear and headed back inside the house. The walls felt safe, and within the comfort of the home, they hoped to brush off the nervous feeling that consumed them. But unfortunately for them, that feeling did not last long. Because that very same night, they got a second fright, and this time it was a big one. It was Edward who woke up first. A weird static noise was echoing through the bed and breakfast. It was distant but off-putting enough to wake him. "Emily! Emily, wake up!" he shouted while violently waking his wife from her slumber. Emily opened her eyes just enough so she could see her husband's worried face. "What is it, Edward?" she asked him, still half asleep. Edward nudged her a little more and said that he heard a weird noise in the house. It seemed to come from the kitchen downstairs. "Don't you hear it?" "It's probably just a raccoon," she said whilst already lying down again. But Edward wasn't convinced. He grabbed a baseball bat from his sporting bag and headed down the stairs slowly. They walked down the stairs, following the noise that eventually led them to the kitchen. And there, on the large kitchen table, they encountered an eerie surprise. A small old-fashioned TV greeted them. The device looked like it came straight out of the 90s, but that wasn't the eerie part. What scared them to their core was what was shown on this television. The TV's screen showed them the footage of that afternoon, the video of them playing in the field as a family. Emily and Edward looked at the screen and afterward at each other. They could see the horror in their partner's eyes. Edward nodded as he realized that it must be so. They rushed up the stairs, packing everything they brought in record time. While Edward finished packing the last pieces of clothing, Emily ran over to their son's room. She put him in his mobile car seat and ran with their still sleeping boy down the stairs. She was eager to get to the car, but Edward wanted to inspect the television one last time. Emily put her son down on the kitchen table and joined Edward in his final swoop of the area. The TV was still playing the footage, but how was such an old device doing that? The answer to that question came when they looked at the back of the device. They saw two long cables running from the back of the TV all the way to the open window in the kitchen. "Look, Emily, the cables are leading outside," he exclaimed in an almost excited voice. Edward reached his hand out of the window, pulling the cords upwards slowly. "They are attached to something." After a few seconds of pulling, they were met with a familiar sight. The cables were attached to a camera that was feeding the footage directly to the television. It seemed to be the same recorder as the one from the afternoon, but this time they decided to look at it more closely. They closed the side screen of the camera and looked at it from every angle. And then they found their first clue. On the side of the screen, there was a label that read the following: "Property of Westgate Living." What could that be? They drove straight to the local police station in the hope that they would get some answers there. They explained the strange occurrences at the B&B to the officer, and the man in uniform, strangely enough, seemed to know exactly what B&B they were talking about. But that's when this family found a way to surprise this officer, because contrary to the other families who just came by with scary stories, this family brought hard proof of the bizarre events. Edward reached into his bag and pulled out the unknown camera that started it all. The eyes of the officer turned large as he gazed at the small black device. After that, it was time to research the name on the label. He opened an internet browser on his computer and typed in Westgate Living. It turned out that Westgate Living was a retirement home for old people. And that was not all. The building stood in a woodland area just a mile away from the family's B&B. "We have to head over there," Emily said. And both Edward and the officer could not agree more. They drove over to the building. The trio, together with their little baby boy, entered the retirement home and made their way to the front desk. Edward got the recorder out and placed it on the desk of the receptionist. That's when the woman behind the desk said something that Edward did not expect. "Hey, it's finally back!" the woman shouted to her colleague. Edward was taken aback by this remark and asked the receptionist for an explanation. But a resident reported it missing after renting it out about a month ago. That fact sparked curiosity with the trio in front of the desk. They asked for the room number of the resident and headed toward it. And when they entered the room, they came face to face with an elderly man. The old man did not seem fazed at all by the couple and the officer in his room. It was like he was expecting their arrival. "All right, you caught me," he said before they could muster a single word. Emily showed the camera and the man immediately started explaining. He said that he was the original owner of the B&B they were staying in. He never wanted to leave his home, but his son didn't care about him. So when he reached the age of 70, his son put him in a retirement home. His son just wanted to profit off the woodland home, so pushing his father aside was an easy choice for him. But the old man didn't want to age in this place. He wanted his home back. So that's why he spent his days commuting back and forth between the retirement home and the B&B. "To do what?" Emily asked him. The old man said that he used everything in his arsenal to scare the renters of the vacation home, hoping that eventually it would become unrentable. Maybe that way his son would give up, and he could finally have his home back. "Well, that worked," Emily said angrily. But it was Edward who did not seem angry at all. He started crying intensely and even stepped forward to hold the old man's hand. Edward said that the story moved him deeply, and not just that. He wanted to help the old man. Edward explained that his father died a few months back. He and Emily tried to take care of him for as long as they could, but eventually they were forced to put him into a nursing home because the care just became too much to bear. Edward said that he inherited a large sum of money. It was just sitting in the bank, and the couple were already looking for ways to invest it. "And I think we have just found its purpose." Edward asked the man for his son's number. And without explaining further, he called the inconsiderate man. He told the son that he wanted to buy the home from him, and of course, The son was eager to accept. But Edward was not going to buy the home for himself. He wired the money to the son, and after receiving the deeds to the property, he immediately handed them over to the old man. "I will rent the place out to you for as long as you want. There is only one catch." The old man could live out his days in his own home, but the family would be able to visit him once a year on their holiday. It was a blessing for both parties. Helping the old man was the most important thing, but owning a vacation home for the future wasn't so bad either. You've reached the end. Thank you for watching.